Hey guys, welcome back to another video on working in China. Today we're going to be talking with another YouTube creator, Michael from the Expat Survival channel, and we're going to be talking about both of our experiences working in China and what people who are in more of an English teaching job need to know if they're thinking of transitioning to something more on the corporate side. So, let's get into it.
Okay, welcome everybody. In this video, we're going to be talking about things you must consider before seeking a non-teaching job in China, whether it be in the corporate sector, in the tech sector, or other industries. In this video, we have myself and Sean, who's actually worked for Huawei, that's going to do a little bit of an introduction so you understand our background and backstory. So Sean, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right, well, hey everyone. For me personally, I've been working in China, mainly in corporate or company jobs for about the past 10 years. I started off in 2010 after I graduated with my master's. I worked in Shanghai with some startup companies for a few years. Then I moved over to Shenzhen in 2014, where I had the opportunity to work for Huawei, doing work for them both in corporate PR as well as consumer marketing. And I was with them until about 2018. Did a lot of work, not just with, say, executive communications for Ren Zhengfei and the like, but also working on, smartphone communications, product launches. And after that, I spent some time at PR agency Weber Shandwick for about a year. And then most recently, I moved down to Hong Kong. And what I would say the most notable thing or interesting thing about my own experience is that I have been chiefly operating with Chinese companies, either working in-house in often Chinese language only environments or working with Chinese clients on the agency side.
Nice. So it sounds like you have a lot of a fulfilled background compared to me. So unlike Sean, I've only been in China for about 2.5 years. I'm hitting 3 right now. And when I first came here, I actually had a logistics background and a little bit of PR experience. I did have an engineering background in my undergrad degree. I did systems engineering and industrial engineering. But when I came here, I kind of shifted careers a little bit. I honestly didn't want a teaching job, not because I don't like teaching, but because I just didn't see that as a career for me in the future, like 10 years from now. So I wanted to go into the tech sector, and I found a company that actually develops banking solutions and AI solutions, not only in China, but also in the overseas market. So I've been working for that company as a product marketing manager, where I kind of get a couple products, kind of determine the market requirements and help the R&D develop the solution needed for target markets. And I've been doing that for about 2.5 years. And yes, it's been quite a ride, and it's not the typical job you would expect as a foreigner that can speak English, because a lot of the times when you come here, a lot of the jobs that are offered are usually English teaching jobs. But in our cases, we have more of a tech background, so we can give you a perspective from our experience on how it is working with Chinese companies, and particularly the tech industry. So for the first topic, we're going to be talking about what you should consider before going to a non-teaching job. And Sean is going to introduce some key differences that he believes between non-teaching jobs and teaching jobs. So what do you think, Sean?
Yeah, all right. So first of all, I guess I would just first and foremost say that, I personally am not trying to knock teaching jobs. I would say if it's something you really enjoy, you definitely should stick with it. But I've also myself seen some of the limitations of working in those type of positions, either from certain opportunities I did over the summer myself previously, or just hearing from friends and other people. But I do think some of the key differences you have to be ready for if you're going to be moving over to, say, the tech side, is that on one hand, it's not really going to be quite as much of a safe space, I guess I would say, just because, I mean, in terms of foreigners in China, there still is, some more privilege compared to the locals. There are people will be easier on you in many cases, but the environment you face in, say, tech companies like Huawei or smartphone manufacturers and the like, is they're often, very fast paced, and it's much more focused on adding value and the results. And so it doesn't matter what your credentials are. It doesn't matter how excited you are, how nice you are. The key thing that I've always experienced is they're always pushing you to show what your results are. And this takes, this takes many forms, I would say, whether it be KPIs that are, very big targets that they want you to make, whether it be the fact that the way they structure salaries often is much more focused on the back end. Say if they give you times 16 months or times 20 months, you only get the extra months after you've met your objectives, met your bonuses, and this is something that's very much the case at Huawei. Whereas even Chinese employees have much more of a pressure, I would say, the weijigan, the sense of crisis, as we say in Huawei. Whereas if you have 20-30% of your overall salary for a year coming from your monthly salary, and then everything else is from the bonus, you really have to meet those targets, otherwise you ain't getting anything. Tencent, I've heard, does similar things, whereas they have a few R&D teams, all competing for the same objective, same target. Maybe you get a million RMB prize if your team meets the result first. The other teams don't get anything. So there's going to be a lot more pressure. It's not necessarily bad, but if you're not the type of person, or that's not what you're looking for, you might want to think twice before you take either a tech job or even a corporate job. Because even though I think there's plenty of places for foreigners in Chinese companies or companies in China, it's not as much of a entitled position. It's not something where you can just fly over like previous expats after maybe graduating from college because they needed someone who was a Westerner. It's not like that anymore. You really have to be able to keep pace with everybody else and meet the results. And those are kind of some of the key things I would say based on my experience.
Yeah, and I can relate to those because one key difference I've seen, at least with my friends that are in the education industry, is you need to prove yourself. So what in my example, I'm not as big as Huawei, of course not, but we have over 20,000 employees, so we're somewhat reputable. When I first started working there, I was on a probation period. It was a 3-month period where they were testing me to see my results. What can I produce? Can I meet the KPI? All these kinds of things. And I had to sign a contract in this probation period. Now, during this probation period, you may not expect your salary to be as high as you would like it to. Afterwards, you can negotiate afterwards. But within that 3-month period, I had to learn really quick and I had to communicate with the locals. So in maybe education industries, you may not need to speak any Chinese at all. You can get away with it. Of course, it helps. But in the tech industry, if you need to meet like a project timeline and you don't speak Chinese, unless you have a translator follow you everywhere, which won't be given to you if you're just like an entry-level job or even a mid-manager level, then you're going to have problems meeting deadlines. You're going to reach a lot of roadblocks. So at the end of my 3-month probation period, I had to prove to them what I did during that time and how I can use my skills to help the company reach their goals. Because my company has quarterly meetings and annual meetings to reach that KPI. It's their annual target. And I had to have a meeting with all I wouldn't say the board members, but the top level management at the end of my 3-month period with a presentation saying what I have contributed and what I have done to the company and how I can help them further. If I couldn't convince them, which I've seen happen, if I couldn't convince them that I can benefit the company to reach their target, then I would have gotten the boot. It's that easy. It's sometimes ruthless too. Do you have any examples, Sean, where maybe on a monthly basis after the probation period, you get paid based on your performance? Like I know in my company, you have like A, B, C level work that you could do on your monthly reports. Do you have something like that?
So what we've done at Huawei, and other tech companies might do something similar, but at Huawei, they generally have the ABC for, say, half-year reviews and yearly reviews. And so when it comes time to looking at, say, your bonus, you basically look, did you do A work, did you do B work, did you do C work? And if you really just worked your heart out, did lots of overtime, you probably get an A, and you can get a huge bonus. If you get B work, you could get anywhere from 5, 6, 7, 8 months salary as a bonus, though. And generally, for many companies, that's kind of expected. It's kind of informally as part of the offer they give you, but still you do have to earn it. What I find more interesting, in terms of bigger companies like Huawei, is that they've been operating for so long, they have so much middle management, and so one of the things they did is they had this kind of what is the competency and qualification system, where not only do you have to say meet your targets, every year, but you have to do kind of a yearly review sometimes, maybe twice every year, no, every 2 years, I think it was, where you have to kind of prove your credentials and your qualifications, not simply mean your KPI, but that you're qualified to be at, say, the level you are. For example, Huawei has levels like all the way up to 24, 25, and basically your level determines the salary you can get, the bonus you can get, for Chinese employees, the kind of stock you can get. And all of this is kind of public information in terms of all of the writings that many of the leaders of Huawei put out. So if you're interested in learning more, I can definitely I'll leave a few links in the description of my video. But yeah, I mean, if you don't prove that you have the qualifications to be at your current level, you could get demoted. You could get a drop in salary. They very rarely will axe people over something like this, but it's very much about, if you want to be paid the high salaries that you get in the tech sector, specifically in our case, it may not be the same for other areas, other sectors, but you have to prove it. They're not willing to just give you a free pass. Another thing I'd like to add, because Michael, you were mentioning some of the issues with, not issues, but some of the proving yourself aspects of probation. I recently saw it with one company, whereas they wouldn't give you your company health insurance until you actually formally pass the probation, and then there may be other things, whereas if you haven't passed probation or you haven't gotten satisfactory remarks, I'm not sure, maybe there'd be something about not getting some of the bonus. I'm not sure if that's an issue, but I think I've heard of that happening. So as long as you prove yourself, as long as you prove that you're the right person to give them the value they want, then you're okay. If not, then they may put you under a lot of pressure to either improve, or they may just let you go.
And so it seems like a hard point we hit on is that we need to prove ourselves to have a job in the tech industry. In particular, like in the education industry, as long as you look the parts and you have some kind of education, you can get the job. But in the tech industry, if you don't have the right background or experience, which they're going to check, they're not going to hire you, because getting the visa process done from a company that's a Chinese company is a big hassle, and it takes a lot of resources. So them having to invest in that, you need to prove that you're worth the while for them to go through that process.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say all teaching jobs are, you have to look the part, though many are, and I know that from some of my own personal experience in the past. But and it's not simply about, you don't only have to look the part. It's also about, you definitely, as we were saying before, you have to not just proving yourself. You don't get a free pass. Whereas if you were a teacher, you might have some problem with something. You ask one of your coworkers, Chinese coworkers, to help. My experience in the tech sector, it varies from department to department, person to person, but oftentimes someone might say, even politely, no, you're on your own. I don't have time to help you. I have my own objectives to meet. So I'm not sure if I'd quite say it is dog eat dog world, but I mean, if you're going to work in a corporate job or a tech company, more and more these days, you have to be able to get by on your own to an extent. I mean, even now, even in big tech companies, the foreign experts, foreign managers they bring over, they don't necessarily get a nice secretary who speaks English and Chinese that will do all the stuff for them. Often even basic things like filling out e-flows online, or getting plane tickets, you have to do it yourself. Doesn't matter how senior you are. So that definitely might be kind of a shift for some people that are in certain types of teaching jobs. And again, I'm still very much a believer in that there is a lot of potential for working in a corporate or a company job, a tech job. There's lots of areas to grow, lots of new experiences, but you have to be aware that there's much less hand-holding going on.
Yeah, and I can definitely relate to that. When I first started working there, I didn't have like a person assigned to me to help me with like basic living needs and communication needs. I had like introduction to different departments, but it depends on the department. The work culture is not same for every company. At least in my company, I've witnessed people that are really good team workers that if you need something to help a project accelerate, they will help you. And then I've had other encounters where if they don't see the money, they're not going to help you. They say, I'm too busy with this project. I got to reach my KPI and all that. And that's just because they're really focused on reaching their KPI because at least in my company, every month you get rated A, B, C. And if you get rated a C, your paycheck for that month is lower than if you get rated an A. So they're really motivated to meet their KPIs. So I can understand where I guess the dog eat dog world comes from.
Yeah, I never actually had to do that month by month myself, but I do remember there was several years ago in the past I had interviewed for one company, and apparently they had a regular monthly salary, and then they had like I think it was 5 or 10,000 RMB as kind of like a monthly quote unquote bonus, and you literally got, as you say, maybe it's similar to what you guys do, a rating every single month, and they would say, oh yeah, there's no problem, of course you'll get your bonus, but if you apparently didn't perform or you screwed up, maybe you wouldn't that month you wouldn't get that 5 or 10,000. So I think it can be a big shock for people. I'm not even sure if they do that over in Silicon Valley, but I mean, there's a lot of debate these days about China tech, Chinese technology companies, but I'm a firm believer in their ability to innovate and innovate quickly, even if there are some rough edges sometimes, like with some of the smartphone features they push out that maybe aren't quite ready to be adopted in the markets where they put them. But they're definitely doing it much faster, and part of it is this pressure. And again, the Chinese term is 危机感, sense of crisis, that the employees have, whereas they have to meet those targets. There's an incredible pressure. Not necessarily you can't overcome it, but it's definitely something you're thinking about, all the time.
Yeah, it should definitely be something you consider before going into the non-teaching job, because I've definitely had days where I felt the pressure, and I've seen a lot of the R&D and the factory work overtime a lot, like 6, maybe even 7 times a week to meet their targets. So yeah, it is a very pressure-based industry. We're not recommending that you don't join the industry. By all means do if you want to, but it's just something to note that you may run into that problem if you go to like the tech industry. So let's talk about a little bit about some career opportunities if you were to decide to go into the non-educative corporate or tech industry. So what are your thoughts on that, Sean?
Well, I think the key thing is that, as we said before, it's not for everyone, but you really have to kind of know what you want out of your career or out of your time in China. Now, when I first moved to Shanghai, I had worked with some smaller companies, some startups, and it had been my goal. I'd always been thinking I wanted to get experience in a kind of a larger company, a larger corporation, not only because it would be good for my CV, but also because it would, better experience. And especially with, at the time, there weren't that many Chinese companies going abroad, but it was something I wanted to do. I wasn't someone who wanted to live kind of an easier, laid-back lifestyle in China. I wanted to experience China, but also, have challenges. And of course, I was also learning Chinese, and I speak, read, and write Chinese in the workplace as well. So that was definitely, and it has been something suitable for me because I wanted that challenge, and I've really enjoyed the experiences I've been able to get working internally at these companies. But yeah, I mean, my own experience is that, like I said, people like teaching English, that sort of thing. Hey, all the more power to them. But me personally, I feel that many English teaching jobs in China aren't really something that lends itself to career advancement or to continuing a career, say, once you go back to your home country or do something else in China, just because you're still doing one thing. And I haven't heard of that many schools that are interested in, or companies that are interested in maybe taking someone, oh, you taught English in China, come and work in our company. So, I mean, that would be kind of one of my main things, is that if you're focusing on doing something after your time in China, what do you want to do? And will that English teaching job help you out? If not, you might want to think about finding something else. just because really is life is a journey and you have to kind of know where you're going. I think it's fine to spend some time in China, either as a teacher, doing something else. But you have to know what you're doing will help you get to your end goal. And if teaching won't, then there might be other opportunities in China. It might be tech, might be another corporate job, might be a smaller company. There's lots of different options, but I would worry if that it's not really something that helps you move forward into something else afterwards. That's all.
And I have to agree with some points. It does depend on each individual, like what their ambitions are, what they like doing, what they want to experiment with. Like if you're an individual that just wants to come and vlog and travel in China for like a year and then go back home, then maybe a teaching job is right for you to at least have a salary to support that ambition. But if you're a person that wants to like have a team that you develop products for, work in a tech industry, or work in other kinds of industry, maybe some research and development, maybe agricultural, then the teaching job maybe can be used as a stepping stone. So I've seen people that use a teaching job to get their feet wet in China, and they really took that time to learn Chinese while they were teaching English to then move on to different kinds of careers. I've also seen teachers who have started again with a teaching job, but then became a manager position and eventually not built their own school, but started their own school where they became the dean and the principal and ran a whole program. Those kind of skills can be relatable back in like the United States. But if you just come and teach English and that's your responsibilities, like you just teach class in English and you don't take on more responsibilities like managerial positions or management, different kinds of administrative processes and all that, it may not be as attractive to other kind of corporate opportunities back at home if you do decide to go back at home.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing that I think is valid is that when we say work in the U.S. Or we work for bigger companies, there are much clearer proofs that they can provide to say yes, you've worked for them. Yes, here's the tax proofs, the salary proofs. Many English teaching schools can't provide those, and so I think it's not simply about being able to show that, hey, look, I have this experience. It's also about being able to prove that this employment was actually a real thing, because more and more I'm finding that HR really wants to verify everything in detail. So that's another aspect to it. Maybe not the biggest one, but as you said, Michael, I completely agree that if you just want to experience China, teaching certainly is a potential way to do it. But I would simply recommend people, while they're enjoying China, kind of also consider what their end goal is, what they want to get out of their experience, what they want to be able to do afterwards, because it's helpful to do some planning, kind of, because there may be something else you can do in addition to or besides teaching that can help better prepare you for whatever that is.
Okay. So another topic we want to discuss, and it's been asked about a lot, is the salary options. So the differences of the non-educational and educational industry's salary options. Now, if you're entry level, at least from my experience in Guangzhou working in a tech company, your salary is probably going to be higher in the education industry if you're like straight out of college and have minimal work experience. And that's because they're comparing you to what you can produce and to other Chinese locals. So if you can't outperform other Chinese doing similar job position than you are, then you can expect your pay to be similar. However, with that being said, the education salary is usually pretty stable, I guess you could say, because it's very popular for Chinese parents to invest a lot into children's education. So the industry is always going to be there. However, you go into the tech industry or maybe other corporate jobs, once you get your feet wet and you can prove yourself, there's definitely opportunities to increase the corporate ladder to have better salary packages. So as Sean mentioned, and in my company as well, they do bonuses. So you may not have a higher monthly salary than an education person, but when that Chinese New Year's come and you get that bonus paycheck, you're like, oh, okay, I see where my money comes from. And this varies from company to company, but I've seen people that maybe get paid between 10 to 15,000 RMB each month, but when it comes at the end of the year, they can get paid like 50,000 to 150,000 RMB all at once. And that's very attractive. And if you do the math, it can definitely end up being more than an education sector salary. So, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I know, I agree. And when I was at Huawei, I was even when I was at starting off even at a higher level, and the base salary was lower. It was maybe a few tens of thousands RMB a month, but then it gets almost doubled once you get the performance results. And so I think it's more than enough to live on. Again, Huawei is a very specific example. When I first started in China, I was working for maybe a very small company. It was for about 10,000 RMB a month, but that was just starting off, and it was because I wanted to work for a startup. And there are some companies that will give you lower salaries. So there may be companies, I think, that might be giving you less than a teaching job, especially if you're working for a bigger, more prominent school. But at the same time, as you've said, Michael, it's very much about getting your foot in the door. Because when I was working for a lot of smaller company startups in Shanghai initially, I had a lot of meetings with leaders of Western Chinese firms about opportunities, and it really came down to, oh well, we like your background, but we'd really love to see you have a company like ours on your CV, and so that kind of made it not really work out. But then I was able to say get into Huawei, which is a very big company. They'll work with other smaller tech companies as well, and then if you had that on your resume, then it's very clear that, oh well, you have experience in this industry now, or you have experience in marketing or PR or product marketing, product management, whatever. And then it's like, okay, well now we can consider you. So that is something I think to consider as well. If you're looking at more of a longer term career path, even 3 to 5 years, I would say it's really also about, if you have your foot in the door, not only do you now have that on your resume and you could jump to another company, especially since tech is really growing a lot in China these days. But in addition, I think if you're already there internally, they may be willing to consider you for a higher level role later on. So I would definitely say it's definitely about getting your foot in the door, even if the salary is a little bit lower, not as high as you may like. Excuse me. Getting your foot in the door is definitely something that's very important.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And just to be realistic with your guys' expectations, if you're first starting out and just getting your foot in the door, getting your feet wet, expect a lower salary than you would like. But as you grow, especially in the tech or corporate sector, it's very easy to gain the experience and then to find other jobs because you have a background where you say, yeah, I've worked for this company, and negotiate your salary even higher. I've seen this so many times with some R&D guys. They were fed up with their pay. They moved to another company and they doubled their pay essentially. So it's definitely possible to get a nice paycheck in the other sectors.
Even for more general roles, in China, it's generally been the practice in recent years. Things might change now because of COVID-19, with more people doing remote working, but it's generally been that if you just change to another job, even if it's the same level, at a different company, you could potentially get a salary increase of 15 to 30%. 30% is way on the high end, but at the very least 10, 15, 20% potentially, if they want you. So not even getting, say, a promotion to a higher level role, you could get, especially if you either have or you develop in the company that you join a key skill set that other companies want, then just move to another company after a year or two and you can get a nice bump potentially.
Yeah, and let's talk about the last topic of this discussion, and that is for personal growth opportunities and seeking non-education industry jobs. What do you think about those?
So in terms of personal growth opportunities, I do think it varies from person to person. People do have different reasons for coming to China, as Michael has said. But for me, I very much enjoy not just learning the culture, the language, but also learning about the Chinese people. And I do think that if you're in a more of a regular traditional English teaching job, there is kind of a dividing line that teachers kind of put on the pedestal. When I did a very short English teaching job years ago in China, they didn't even want me talking Chinese, talking to the parents outside the classroom setting. So, I mean, that was a long time ago, but I do think it still applies to nowadays. Whereas, if you're wanting to either learn about China, learn about Chinese people, I think you're going to have a much better shot of that if you're actually working in more of a regular company, tech or otherwise. I also think that not just that, but also say being in we talk about more of a high pressure environment, more of a challenge, more of a goal focused setting, like a corporate role would be, is that you are able to learn, or you have the opportunity at least to learn more about different types of working styles and to appreciate them, as opposed to, I think the classic trope of the expat in China is they come to a Chinese company and they want to only do things their way because they learned the quote unquote right way to do things back home, and they want to only do it that way. But of course, that might be a little extreme, but it does certainly happen. I've seen it many times in China. Whereas if you're working in a more of a company corporate role in China, if you want to last, you will have to learn to appreciate, to a degree, adopt, or to be able to work with the Chinese working style. Because if the Chinese, especially if it's a Chinese company or even an American company in China, where most of the employees are Chinese, they're not going to change their entire structure just for you, a single person. So you will have to be able to learn, adapt, and you get a lot more culture shock, I think, working at a corporate job, a tech job, compared to, say, an English teaching job. But if you can persevere, you will be able to, I think it has a very positive effect on you. You're able to think in different ways, your way of thinking, your mindset's expanded, and I do think it really is much better in terms of developing as a person over the long run. I mean, that's been my experience so far.
Yeah, and I can't speak for everyone, of course not. But I can just speak from my experiences that I've seen a couple types of expats here. I've seen the ones that just want to come and party, and then they teach here for a year and they're gone. And they don't really blend in with the culture. They develop an expat bubble. It's like a little bubble of expats. They only speak English. They maybe know how to say hello in Chinese, and they don't really immerse themselves with the culture.
Yeah.
Nothing against that. It's probably like their personal preference. But if you're more in a non-education type industry, you're going to be exposed to more Chinese locals, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
I would say I probably have maybe one or two expat friends, like friends in Guangzhou, and they speak Chinese. So like they actually want to get immense with the culture. And once you get immense with the culture, you can kind of figure out different social norms, how business meetings are conducted, how management works, and you just learn different methods of getting things done. Now, if you were to come in here on a high horse and say, hey, this is how we do it in my country, so you should do it that way, it's not going to end very well for you. You got to have some kind of adaptability or flexibility to have an open mind to kind of meld different kinds of ideas together so that you can better improve yourself if you face a similar situation back at home, if you were to make China like a temporary excursion while you learn more about the culture. You can take what you learn here back home and use those kind of methods of dealing with management, dealing with underperformers, overperformers, and all that. That can all be used in the future. Personally, I just like saying that I have Chinese on my resume and I can communicate to Chinese people. And if I were to ever go back to the U.S., I can kind of add a little point there to say, hey, I know how to penetrate Chinese markets. I know exactly what you need to do to go ahead and get more business inside China if you were to do that. So that's just something that I personally like. And of course, my wife is Chinese. So if I want to communicate with her side of the family, 没办法，我一定要学习中文. Like there's no way I have to learn how to speak Chinese.
Of course, they also have the Chinese phrase that I love to use, 如上随俗, which is, basically, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. It's more literally translated as, when you go into a new village, you observe their customs. And on the note that you raised about, coming in on a high horse, that reminds me very specifically of a conversation I had. I think it must have been late last year or early this year with a tech company CEO. And we were having a conversation about, cross-cultural issues, and specifically, his experience kind of working with or talking with, expats that came from overseas to work with tech companies in China. And I think whatever he said in Chinese was more or less like, these foreigners, these expats, they just come in and they want to tell you what to do. They aren't willing to listen at all. And so I think that is a good summation, at least in terms of how I think some of the expat issues can manifest themselves in China.
Yeah. Okay, well, I hope you guys learned more about what to expect if you were to go into getting a non-teaching job in China. You can look at this video up here that I link on how to search for a non-teaching job in China, which is another story because it's quite difficult in my opinion. But I hope you learned something from here. Sean, before we go, do you want to say anything about your channel or you want to give like yourself a plug?
Alright guys, that's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in. If you're interested in learning more about living and working in China, please feel free to check out my blog, thechinaculturecorner.com, and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also, don't forget to check out Michael's channel, again that's Expat Survival, and I'll also leave a link to it in the description. If you have any comments or questions about China, you can leave something in the comment section below, or you can send me a message on Twitter at SeanUM_China. Either way, I'd be happy to talk more and answer any questions you have. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.